YouTube, how's it going? So, today, on my channel, you know that I usually post a lot of acting videos on here, but today I'm going to post something just a little different. It's still in the realm of, like, telling stories and kind of acting, in a way, but recently I wrote a self-published novel called Dream Catalyst. Of course, right, you'll see it as backward, but it's available on Amazon.com. All you have to do is type in Dream Catalyst, Samantha Mirandola, or if you go to my Instagram, you can there's a link in the bio you can click. It's only available in the United States Amazon at this point in time, but you can ship to Canada through Amazon.com. Just make sure it says .com and not .ca if you're Canadian. So, basically, what I wanted to do is I decided I want to release an audiobook version of it as well. Sort of an audiobook, like I'm going to read it out loud to you. And I'm going to release a chapter a week so that you can either have one of two options. You can either follow along, listening to the audio version with the book if you decide to purchase it, or you can listen to it for free and it'll be available to you on this platform. You'll just have to wait a week for each chapter to come out. So, if you end up deciding to listen to it for free, I honestly totally understand student budget things, but if you do decide to do that and you would like to show your gratitude, you can always go on Amazon for me, and because you'll still be listening to the story, you can still leave a review for me. And the more reviews I get on Amazon, the more likely my book is to sell. So if you do that for me, I'd really appreciate it. Also, you can also refer the book to a friend, or something like that, and that's also really helpful to me. Or even like if you post on social media, that's also helpful ways for me where you don't have to necessarily buy the book. It'll still help me out. So anyway, without further ado, I'm going to read the author's note, the back, and the first chapter within this video, and then next week I'm going to release chapter 2. So, I'm probably going to be sipping a Red Bull during this because I pulled an all-nighter, and the reason why this book is star-themed is because I really prefer the night. I'm a night owl. I prefer the night to the morning, so I'll tend to do my work overnight. So, I'm sorry the Red Bull's a little unprofessional, just ignore that. So, let's get started. I'm going to start by reading the back. Dream Catalyst. V. She/her. Some want to read minds, but I know that the real power is in having one's mind read. My name is V, and I read minds daily. Though, despite my ability to read those around me, I struggle to understand myself. I voyaged across the globe in search of my true identity. What does V stand for? Along my journey, I become intimately familiar with two types of people, the shrinkers and the dream catalyst. Both groups will be equally credited in my journey of self-discovery. This largely exaggerated fictional autobiography is nothing more than a prolonged session of self-contemplation. Welcome to my mind, V. So, Dream Catalyst. Dedicated to the Dream Catalysts. To my mother, Giselle Mirandola, for rather than saying, get a job, said, good luck with the novel. To my sister, Cynthia Mirandola, who inspires others by working towards her dreams. To my Nano Franco, who tells far better stories than I ever will. To the Dream Catalyst who made this novel possible, Roshan Rashad, that's my boyfriend. And finally, to those who broke my heart, for reminding me it's still there. That's, yeah. People are capable, at any time in their lives, of doing what they dream of. Paulo Coelho, The Alchemist. So, then the table of contents. A note from the author. Quote, at the beginning. Your brain is your home. Keep it well decorated. Read, read, read. Signed V. Some want to read minds, but I believe that the real power is in having one's mind read. I read minds daily, so sensitivity is both the hero and villain to my life story. I have struggled for 3 years to write this story. I've restarted this novel 5 different ways, all of which failed to captivate my interest. The first beginning was poetic. I scoured every hidden synonym in the thesaurus to sound both as snobbish and disingenuous as possible. It began with a thrilling and entirely distant opening. I entered my boudoir and noticed my illustration of a girlish figure of 10 years of age hung crooked on the wall. Captivating. Thanks to a friend who recommended I read Oscar Wilde's essay, Politics in the English Language, I was redirected from the destructive urge to resurrect the English language, only to murder her again with outdated diction and grammatical errors. My second attempt began with a suicide note. I envisioned calling the first chapter the beginning of the end. This was problematic. After years of deliberation and education, the idea was rightly scrapped. The third version was erotic. I sent that to a boyfriend at the time. It was successful in only one regard. That success did not include communicating an enriching narrative. I will leave its only success to the imagination. I then attempted a fourth version in which I summarized my character in a paragraph. An idea of novelty, I thought. It's original, it's different. But this version would have denied my character its right to believe she was a woman of complexity. This disservice of an idea was backspaced. I almost did not write this book at all. Thought its content would put me into a depression. And my original idea for it very well might have. But then my boyfriend, Roshan Rashav, recommended The Alchemist. Thanks to both him and Paulo Coelho, this story does not have a bleak ending. Rather, this novel has a hopeful ending, though I won't spoil it. To succeed, one must write about success. To write about success, one must acknowledge failure. This story, my story, does both. I almost wrote this story for the wrong reason, for your approval. This approval-seeking cell multiplies in my body, and admittedly, it will never truly be abolished. It can, however, be controlled. To give way for other flowers to bloom within me, I have pruned back that officiously critical weed. I've been avidly watering my other ingrained characteristics, self-admiration. Like the abdominal, this muscle must be exercised to be perceived by others, and I'm working it daily. Aristotle's God, the unmoving mover, is so supreme that he does nothing aside from self-contemplate his existence. Ariana Grande, a philosopher in her own right, believes God to be a woman. Yes, I quoted a Billboard Top 100 song, and no, I'm not sorry. I suppose that by both these definitions, I believe myself to be a god. For who better to self-contemplate for hours on end than an author? That is, all this novel really is, a prolonged session of self-contemplation. I have no idea how successful my novel will be, but I am pleased with it, which is a success within itself. From a secular perspective, I believe that all of us can be our own gods. So let us all afford ourselves that right to self-contemplate. It is not a luxury, rather, it is a necessity. Read onward with this precaution. With the choice to attain either wisdom or knowledge, and assuming they are not one and the same, I would choose wisdom. This largely exaggerated, non-fictional narrative would attest to this. Welcome to my mind, Samantha Mirandola, in brackets V. Chapter 1. Transparency. Opening quote. If you love me, deliver difficult truths. If you want me to love you, send delicate lies. Signed V. I want stars for breakfast, I thought to myself, as I overlooked the ravine from my view on the bridge beneath the stars. What better way to start a day than with a beautiful night? I was writing songs in my head. It was too dark for a notepad, and there were no electrical sockets for my laptop. It was midnight at earliest, but I was oblivious to time. I intentionally left my mobile phone at home. My mother insisted I always carry it with me when I traveled the night. She was worried I would be kidnapped, but I assured her that if I did go missing, I would be entirely to blame. This left her unassured. Despite this, she did not persist any further as she trusted my independence, for the most part. What she did not know then was that I certainly did intend to go missing. MIA, missing the influence of others' actions. Starry nights were too expensive to share. I was greedy, and I did not like sharing my solitude. Because of this, I would make a very disimpassioned photographer. My songs were to distract from a boy that monopolized my thoughts. Feminists have better things to do than think of boys. Still, I guiltily proceeded. I hope my innocent age of 20 would absolve me from this charge. This boy was my junior by 2 years, but I did not care because his soul was my senior. There were billions of boys and millions of reasons to forget any single one of them. However, and to my detriment, once I set fixation on one, it was an onerous burden to push my mind from their focus. I was never sure if it was them that I loved, or rather my desire to complex individuals that attracted me to them. I speculated that lust would reaffirm my desire to know the human condition in them. Rather than inflame the thought of him, whoever he was at the time, I would avoid irritating that infective thought by nurturing it with distractions and songwriting. Like most people, I was very passionate about studying the human experience. Humankind is narcissistic that way. If I were astute, I would have studied psychology or biology. Instead, I studied the arts, though I would hate to define myself by my occupation or discipline of study. I often criticize society's obsession with categorizing one another into restrictive boxes. In my opinion, our inclination to categorize was exhaustive and to our detriment. I considered obsessive categorization and restrictive laws to be a strong indicator of the regression of a society. I wrote songs by the ravine in the hopes that someday I would become a vocalist. Aside from my desire to sing professionally, I also wanted to write. I was unsuccessful in writing because I approached the craft entirely detached. I needed to write beautiful stories in beautiful places. That was why I came to the bridge at midnight. In the stars, I hoped to find a vision. Mr. Maverick, a philosopher I adored, correlated corporate headquarters to prison cells because of their similar architectural structure. He would compare schools and libraries to mouse mazes. He argued an office space was an entirely unfit location for the creative mind to roam unlimited. So instead of writing in the library, I intended to start writing here. Not at this hour, but at any other hour of day, I would. This place had potential. I hoped this space would cure my writer's block. I had a few ideas for a novel. In the first, a young woman 20 years old would wait in a restaurant. An elderly man of 60 would arrive as her blind date. She would initially consider the date to be a practical joke put on by her friends. However, her being a woman of good nature, she would continue the date to avoid embarrassing the elderly man. She would recall last summer to him and reveal her troubled past. He would help her discover that she was fixated on the trauma of her past. He would then urge her to overcome those traumas. Her charming date would help her discover that she was living in her own unpopulated world. In the end, her actual age would be revealed. Despite thinking she was 20 for the majority of the novel, in reality, the woman was 65 years old. The woman lived in a disillusioned state where she believed she was still 20 years old. She lived in denial for so long to avoid living in the present. It was a brilliant idea with a plot twist, and I adore plot twists. But I could not determine what the nature of her trauma would be. Was it a romantic relationship, family related? How would the elderly man help the woman overcome her trauma? Would it be too similar to another book? I had another idea. A group of tiny people, the size of rats, would ride a shoe boat to the big city, while in reality, the big city would be a city of giants. The tiny civilians would live their whole lives believing they were of average size. In reality, pill bottles and coffee cups would tower over them in the big city. The moral of this story would be linked to Plato's cave ideology. I liked the idea of it, and it had another plot twist, and I adore plot twists. But had this story been done before? Yes, it had been done before. Perhaps if I referred to Jonathan Smith as inspiration, it would be considered socially acceptable. Still, I was not sure if it was novel-worthy. I will write it as a short story instead, I thought. That is what I did with all of my ideas, except for one. This particular idea deserved a novel, but I was not ready to write it yet. Today, however, I was seeking my aspiration from the stars. I liked wishing on them. It made me feel important. I pulled on the curls that spiraled down my shoulders like gift-wrap ribbons that overflowed off of the side of a Christmas package. I want to be famous and successful, I said to the stars. Make me famous and successful. Then the wake dreams began. Wake dreams were like daydreams, but original. I liked being original. It made me feel important. I had wake dreams very frequently. I desired something unattainable, and so I would wake dream about it until it became a reality. I liked unattainable dreams. If a dream was attainable, it was no fun and probably not very difficult to achieve. I liked challenges. They made me feel important. I dreamt of performing my songs in front of hundreds of thousands of people. I also dreamt of writing bestsellers for mass audiences. I wanted others to pay me for my time. An odd concept considering I gave most of my time away for free and often in excess. But I wanted people to value me. I wanted others to put me on a pedestal and marvel at my talent. I wanted them to tattoo my quotes on their backs. I wanted them to ask for my autograph and defend me to my critics. I wanted to be glorified and loved, but most importantly, I wanted to be valued. I would wake dream for hours. Success was all I wanted. Success in whatever I had surmised that week to be my calling. I was willing to work for it, too. I was training my mind to be an astronaut. If my wishes were in the stars, I would fly out to meet them someday. Some people live in the past. I, on the other hand, was in a constant state of trying to maneuver my future to the present. My mind was preoccupied with straight-guising my escalation to success. I lived by the phrase I will, and this was problematic. was better than living by the phrase I can't, or by the phrase I won't, but it was nowhere near as useful as living by the phrase I am. I kept a vision board in my room. In fact, one wall of my room was entirely cluttered with motivational quotes and my aspirations. On the board, I would post future milestones to my success, and I would check them off as I achieved them. The problem was, I had not chalked off any of the milestones yet. Vision meant future goals, and I remained stuck in the present. I was in a constant struggle, desperately trying to connect the two. Idle dreams were sluggish, and I felt very work-shy. To compensate, I would overwork myself in areas that did not reflect the visions on my board. My thoughts were jumbled and easily preoccupied with things like boys, money, entertainment, and wake dreams. This, however, was not a fault I would dwell on tonight. No, tonight I would wake dream. I would wake dream of fantastical lands and ravines very far away from here. When I looked to the stars again, my eye caught sight of the second star to the right. Now there was a literary genius. Rereading J.M. Barrie's Peter Pan in adulthood was an ingenious decision on my part. It was the equivalent of being seated in the middle of a live symphony where stringed instruments encircle your seat, serenading soft lullabies while brass instruments simultaneously mutter thought-provoking poetry, all while an innocent vocalist belts a string of bell-like notes toward you. J.M. Barrie suggested that once a child stopped believing in fairies, that the fairy that was birthed from their first laugh withers into death. He argued this was inevitable to all, with the exception of Peter Pan, the boy who would never grow old. I wondered on that starlit bridge what was to come of the fairy that belonged to a child adult. A child adult was one who never entirely lost the innocence of their youth. Child adults gradually embraced adulthood, but only in a waggish fashion. What if a child adult whimsically believed in their fairy again, even if only for a moment, perhaps in a nostalgic mental journey to their once beloved childhood, then, preceding their 9-to-5 dream slayers, forgot to believe, for a moment, only to believe again on moonlit bridges. Could their fairy resurrect? Surely if it was a holy thing, it would. But still, not all holy things resurrect. A patron saint will only be canonized a saint after she has passed. Peculiar it was for me to think a saint could live her whole life thinking herself ordinary, when in actuality she was a holy thing. As I deliberated this arbitrary concept, time kept in motion. I began to notice the night dwindle out as the sun bleached the starry sky. This signaled to me that it was her time to return home. I gathered my belongings and tossed them to the sky. All I really brought with me to the ravine were my dreams, well, with the exception of my bike. I kicked the stand and grasped the handles, mounted it, and trotted it through the city's downtown. Streetlights winked at me and like the stars of that night did before sunrise. I pedaled past my favorite cafe, past the familiar shops, and past the potted flowers that lined the street passages. The downtown was my favorite aspect of this small conservative city. It was the one area that was not so desolate, especially when compared to the cul-de-sac the house I resided was located. I was a wanderlust, but for now my travel was fictional. This would only be until my stars granted me my single greatest wish. That wish was to obtain success. They were bound to do so someday soon. The small city was still in slumber. Most local businesses only opened around 9 and closed around 4. It was a short window, but presumably a successful one as the local shops seemed to sustain themselves. The road was winding and elevated. It required that I exert some effort as I pedaled. By the time I reached the yellow house in the cul-de-sac, I had grown rather sleepy, and I was eager for a good dream. My mother was in the living room asleep. She was binge reading that morning, and she had fallen back asleep mid-book. She would wake soon, though. She found difficulty in sleeping late into the morning, while I found it difficult to sleep late into the night. My sister was also an early riser, but this morning she slept. I clambered the stairs to my bedroom. I, too, decided to venture into sleep. In thinking from the narrator's perspective. In thinking she was in her bed, Bee realizes not that she is still amongst the stars, at least in thought, with her mind filled with alluring ideas like the philosophy of love, which she knows is arbitrary, her aspirations, and with the questions she posits concerning the human condition, she was always lost in thought. Think and dream all she wants. What the girl does not know yet, and perhaps never will fully understand, is that she must live through these ideologies if she wishes to understand them. This is the purpose of life, to live through the philosophies you dream of. Oh, and will she ever live through them? Some things you should know about the girl. She knows her name is V, but she does not know what it stands for. She keeps an autobiography in her mind, and she is determined to share it with the world. She does not believe in barriers, especially in love. This is her second greatest folly. She likes reading about life before living it, as do most bookworms. At this point in time, she is still religious. That, too, she will outgrow. She will stop praying to the gods when she meets the atheist who teaches her that fate is in her own hands, though I will not spoil it. I will share, though, that this atheist brings her one step closer to manifesting her future onto her present. Those who will help her understand the human nature are many, too many to list. Those who will help her to understand the philosophy of love in her life are few. Those few are highly influential in her narrative. They include realist art and wanderlust. Another noteworthy thing to know about V. Her greatest folly is her desire to learn about herself through others. She vicariously travels across the globe by placing herself in the shoes of others. She does so with ease. This, another spoiler I will leak, she most definitely outgrows. To understand herself, she will meet others. To understand guidance, she will meet me. But to understand the meaning of life, she will meet herself. Something noteworthy to mention about me. I am her guardian angel. I pop in and out as the narrator to the story of her life. V and I will meet soon. But our meet will be postponed until a tragedy. She will not undergo turmoil alone this time. Back to V's perspective. As I ran home from somewhere irrelevant to the narrative, thoughts of the boy tickled my mind again. Perhaps that was why I felt so light. He was athletic. Though I would hate to define others by their hobbies or occupation, his athleticism felt more like a character trait than a hobby when it pertained to him. If athleticism were a frame of mind, this would perhaps be his defining characteristic. However, this was not his name. His name was something else. He was called realist for a reason I was yet to discover. Realist believed that a day indoor was a day wasted, and I admired that about him. While I preferred cafes to sunlit strolls, he reminded me of the luxury of the expansive grassy fields that lined his paradise. When I spent time with him, I also absorbed the outdoors by default. I figured I would call upon him and we would walk our dogs. Realist was always willing to go on walks. After clambering the hills that led to the cul-de-sac where I lived, I harnessed Aimless, our family dog. Aimless was always eager to see me, or anyone for that matter. Sheep-white and bright-eyed, Aimless always looked forward to walks. A sheep, like a dog, will not give life much thought, I pondered to myself. I instantly recalled The Alchemist and the life it outlined of a shepherd. In fact, a lot of literature talked about sheep. William Blake wrote about them too. The Bible also used these animals as a subject to its parables. What was so appealing of these animals? Was it that they lacked in knowledge where they trusted in abundance? We eat the lambs we feed. Why, then, do they stay so loyal? Dogs have more logic to their loyalty. They only benefit from their friendship with humankind. They are fed and not eaten, groomed, sheltered, without a service duty. They are dependent. I liked dogs, but not dependents. Still, I loved Aimless. He had a charm to him that allured people, as do most dogs. Aimless and I roamed the neighborhood. Realist residence neighbored ours. It was a trek in itself, but not one of unbearable length. To prolong the trek further, the stroll took double the time it should have when I walked with Aimless. Every 5 or so steps he would stop, but he would come to a halt. Aimless always found a reason to stop and smell the roses. I tugged his leash to nudge him along. He had not been trained well. We were loose with the training because he was small in size and gentle in nature. Consequently, he would verbally harass any canine to walk his direction. Aimless was always jocular in presence. I believed that was what made him so endearing to humankind. When we finally did reach Realist's doorstep, we were greeted by his howling dog. Ringing the doorbell was unnecessary. Realist opened the door. His tall, slender figure filled the doorframe. And euphoric adrenaline streamed through my veins. I smiled. He nodded. He looked to my right and then to my left. He seemed dissatisfied. "Where's Zeal?" he questioned. I deflated. He was referring to my sister. She keeps his heart locked in her forgotten sock drawer, and she swallowed the key so he could not get it back. "Studying. She says hi," I lied. Now he was the one who looked deflated. Want to walk with me?" I gestured to Aimless, who was non-apprehensive of wandering past his boundary and into Realist's doorframe. I softly tugged his leash toward me. Yeah, give me a minute." Realist disappeared behind the doorframe. "Want water or something?" "No, I'm okay, thank you." Realist's dog never deviated from the porch. He was well trained. He explored with a childlike innocence, but never passed his borders. His leash was more an accessory than a necessity. Aimless was preoccupied with his newfound company. "Vi is here! Realist, don't be rude! Tell her to step in," called a thick-accented European woman from within the house. It was Realist's mother. "I have the dog. I can stand here, but thank you, though," I responded. A woman emerged in the doorframe where Realist once stood. Her voluminous hair cascaded her shoulders. "Vi, have you read any good books lately?" she asked. "Just finished Moby Dick," I replied. There was a pause. "That's not a book. It's a traveler's journal," she speculated. "More so a textbook of whales with outdated facts," I joked. "I read it too when I was your age," responded Realist's mother, "and then I grew up." Unsure how to respond, I affirmed it was a long read, and a challenging one at that. "Be careful, Nomad," cautioned Realist's mom. "We find discomfort in goodbyes, but wanderers find discomfort in abstaining from them. I will tell you a story. Once was a woman who was gifted a map. Adoring the person who presented it to her, she circled the places she wanted to go. She memorized all the different continents of the world, all the lands and oceans. Finally, she set out on her quest to find the villages she circled. She rode her horse across the continent. But one day, there was a wind that blew from the north. It gusted the map from her grips. Without the map, she was lost. Never was she found again. "Is that the end?" I asked. "It ends rather abruptly." "Perhaps that was the point of it," she replied. She reached down to pet Aimless, who was now licking her shoes. "Without the map, she lost her way," I thought aloud. "Without the map, she lost herself," replied the woman. "Or maybe she lost the person she was expected to be," I suggested. "That was a beautiful story. But Nomad's not my name," I smiled. "You call me Nomad. My name is Vi." Unresponsive to my statement, the woman replied, "Where are you taking Realist?" "Just to the park. Aimless needs a walk." "Enjoy the sun. Dinner starts at sundown. Be back for then. I'll set you a plate." "Thank you," I replied, "but I promised my mom I would be home for dinner." The woman smiled. "You're right. Nomad's not your name after all." Realist came to the door. I noticed he changed to the black striped t-shirt I gifted him for his birthday last year. He wore an addictive cologne and combed his hair back. "Let's go, Vi," he stated, and so we went. We liked to pretend we were philosophers. It made us feel important. Together, we walked down the hills of the rugged neighborhood. We were on the verge of asking each other imprudent questions which we ignorant believed to carry some depth to them. We did this not to pass the time per se, but rather to pretend we were spending our leisure time wisely, as an intellect might. "What's the meaning of life?" I asked Realist after he told me about his devastation that the trees behind his house were recently cut down by the city. "The meaning you give it," he responded adamantly. "So you don't think that there's any overarching meaning to life then?" "No, I think the meaning of life is the meaning you give it." "You're such a pessimist," I taunted. I knew it would agitate him. "No, I'm not," he replied, defensive. "I'm a realist." "All pessimists think they're realists," I smirked. You are the family crest of pessimism." "Why? Because I don't believe life has a purpose outside of what you give it? If you do, you're an optimist, and optimists are fools." "No, I'm just a realist," I replied smugly. "You identify as an optimist. You take pride in that. You told me so yourself the last time we had this argument." "Debate," I corrected. "Okay, so what if I do? I would rather be an optimist than a pessimist." "But you already are one," he said. "Optimists don't call themselves realists because they know the world isn't as beautiful as they make it out to seem. You just choose to look at the bright side, but in doing so, you're acknowledging there to be a dark side. You choose to turn a blind eye toward it." "I think the world is beautiful," I said, gazing into the sky. I thought of the stars hiding beneath the sun's overshadowing rays. I was sure they were winking back at me. "And that is why you are an optimist, and I am a realist for thinking that at times it is beautiful, and at other times it is not." "I hope I never see the world as anything but beautiful," I responded, knowing full well I already did. "I hope you don't either," Realist said. I tugged Aimless along as he trotted through the grass. It was a challenge to draw Realist's dog out of his gaze for long enough to convince him to start walking along. All he wanted was to socialize. I could not blame him. I spent every minute of the day conversing with others. If I was caged in a house of dogs and I was only permitted to socialize with other human beings sporadically, I too would become quite the socialite. With the end of this chapter rapidly approaching, I had a question I needed to ask. I had this hunch, and I was not sure why, but I had this strange suspicion that this summer was about to end, and that it would never start again. I was not sure what that meant. I had this unceasing notion of speaking my heart at that moment, or I would forever go without the answer I craved. If I did not ask the question to which I needed an answer now, I would be stuck in the present. I could not have that. I was in a constant state of trying to negotiate my future to the present, and now was the time to bargain with my fate. I have a question, I said. May I ask it? The beauty of questions is that you do not need permission to ask them. You might not get an answer, but you can always ask them. It would do you better to ask instead, will you answer my question? Will you answer my question then? Smartass, I smirked. I'll try. Optimist, he smirked. Do you like me? Sure, what's not to like? No, I said. Do you like me? Oh, no, Realist said with his eyes. With his mouth, he said, why do you ask? You've known me for years. You've known I've liked you for years. But you like zeal. Why? It's not that I don't like you. We would be incompatible. Pessimist, I coughed. Why? All right, B. Realist took in a deep breath and slowly exhaled. I waited for the longest minute of my life. After this suspense, he continued. My mother calls you a nomad. I used to think that she got your name confused with someone else. Until one day she told me she smelt sea salt in your hair. I'm not sure what you mean, upset abhorred. I sniffed my hair. I just washed it. Let me clarify, he said. He pondered for a moment and then spoke. You once asked me a question. You then answered the question you asked. Your answer assured me my mother was right to call you a nomad. Well, what was the question, I asked. I had asked Realist many questions over the years, which resonated with him so deeply. The question was, he started, if you were to live one of two lives, which would you pick? In the first, you would live in extremes. If you were not in euphoria, you would be in a state of devastation, never placid. Or you could live in a permanent state of tranquility. You would never feel extremes in anything, not devastation nor bliss. But you would live in a comfortable middle. Which would you pick? I would choose the euphoria, I said without hesitation. Even accepting devastation, he questioned. As a consequence, yes, I responded. Why? Because that's an odd answer. Most would choose tranquility. I would choose tranquility. There was a pause. Opposites attract, I started. Not that kind of opposite, he retorted. His words punched my stomach. You know, I began, your mother might be wrong. I've never traveled. I stay here in the summers, and I don't have an urge to leave. Also, if I were to settle with anyone, it would be with you. In body, sure. In mind, you would never settle, Realist stated. I would not be so firm on this otherwise, he began. For not for the fact that I also smell the sea salt. I know sooner or later the wind will carry you back to the sea. We walked in silence for a moment. Aimless kept tugging at the leash while his well-behaved canine companion stayed by his owner's side for the duration of the walk. I became irritated at Aimless because he was so directionless and stupid. What irritated me most, however, was not his careless attitude toward life, but rather that his eyes looked so familiar, too familiar for comfort. God, why were his eyes so familiar? After a moment passed, Realist spoke again. V, why do you love me? He asked. I was taken aback by this. I have given this much thought over the years, and I knew exactly why, but I had never surmised that he might ask. I gestured to his well-mannered dog. Then I gestured back to Aimless. See how he walks all staggered and directionless and yours doesn't? You give things direction, I replied. What's your secret? Realist thought about it. I don't know. I suppose it might be because I take him on long walks. That's why I love you, I said. Realist hid his smile behind his black-collared t-shirt. And a gust of wind passed through him. I caught a whiff of his addictive cologne. Hey, Realist, I said childishly. Ask me a riddle. You send them to my sister. Ask me one. Zeal is clever, V. You're smart but not clever, if the two can be differentiated, he began. Ask me anyway, I said, annoyed. Okay, fine. He considered for a moment, then asked, What is your name? You know my name. It is V, I stated. Yeah, but what does it stand for? What? What does V stand for? He asked again. I don't know. I don't think it stands for anything. Everything and everyone have to stand for something. What does V stand for? I don't know, I responded, defeated. Ah, he said. We walked again in silence. So sunny outside, I said, not in an attempt to make small talk, but as a genuine observation. There's not a cloud in the sky. Not one. Tonight, if I look to the sky, I'll see the stars. It will be a transparent sky. So, that was chapter 1. If you want to hear chapter 2, make sure you tune in again next week. Probably I'll do Mondays. I think I'll do Mondays at 6 p.m. So yeah, thank you for listening. I'm going to attach, if you want to purchase the book Dream Catalyst, I'm going to attach to the link to the Amazon in the description, the link to Amazon in the description below. But yeah, thank you very much for listening, and I hope you tune in next week to hear chapter 2. Bye!